Hello, my friends. My name's Don Chapman, and you've just tuned into Origins. It's great to have you with us today. Origins is a forum that we take the evidence of science and use it to validate the truth of creation. Design demands a designer. Does just random chance make things happen with complexity and order? That's going to be our question today. And our guest is Dr. Brad Harrub. Dr. Brad, it's so good to have you here today.
Great to be back.
Now, we're going to look at a couple of things to see where there's design. And the first one is going to be, where did all the matter come from? The universe. And how many options are there?
There's really only three, and if you think about it for just a moment, the evolutionists have done a pretty effective job at trying to teach our kids or grandkids that if you cannot measure it in a laboratory setting, if you can't touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it with your hands, then it's not real. And so they would place God into that category. They say, hey, we can't prove God exists, thus He must not be real. I want us to look at just a couple of examples of how we can prove God is real today. As the screen says, design demands a designer. We're going to look at exactly how we can prove that designer is real. If we look out into space, one of the easiest things to do, walk our children outside on a clear night, we point up to the stars, to the moon, and we show them, hey, we know that stuff exists. We know the planets, we know the other stars out there are real. How did it get here? And as you mentioned, there really are only three options of where the universe came from. The first option is that it's eternal, that it's been here forever and ever and ever, that matter has always existed. The second option is that it's not eternal, but rather it created itself from nothing. And the third option is that it's not eternal, didn't create itself, but rather it was created by something or someone anterior or superior to it.
Now, when I look at those three things, I can't come up with a fourth one. It's got to be one of those three things.
If you really think about it, it all boils down to those three options. The first one asks the question, is the universe eternal? Has it always existed? Now, if you think with me for just a moment, here we see a good picture of a spiral galaxy. You notice it's kind of rotating outwards. We know from the way the universe is expanding that the universe is not eternal. We know it had to have a beginning. And in fact, even evolutionists will admit that. For instance, Robert Jastrow, an evolutionist, notice what he says, Don. The lingering decline predicted by astronomers for the end of the world differs from the explosive conditions that they have calculated for its birth. But the impact is the same. Modern science denies an eternal existence to the universe, either in the past or the future.
Help me understand that. It denies an eternal existence, which means there had to be a time when there was no universe, and then there was a time when there was a universe.
There had to be a beginning.
So there was a beginning, a time when it wasn't here and a time when it was there, and so no one is saying that matter is eternal anymore.
So the first option we have to throw out.
Okay, everybody's thrown that out.
We're gone. Next option is, okay, if it's not eternal, maybe it created itself from nothing.
That's a neat trick.
That would be a neat trick. In fact, you can just imagine one of our local discount superstores trying to sell people a bunch of nothing. We've got nothing on sale for $5.99 today. If we tell our kids, hey, go get an empty box, make sure it's empty, look in it, tape it up, put it in your closet, leave it there for 10 years, take it out and see what you got. You got nothing.
You don't get something from nothing. I think everyone listening to us knows something doesn't come from nothing.
Violates all the laws of physics, if you think about it. And here's the point. Even evolutionists recognize that, and so what they try to do is they try to shrink down the universe to a very small point, hoping that the general population forgets the fact that, hey, we still got to discuss. For instance, Alan Guth was interviewed in Omni magazine several years ago, and I want you to listen to how he tries to get away with this something coming from nothing argument. They asked him the question, they said, just how big was this very early pre-inflation universe? His response, amazingly small, about 10 to the minus 24 centimeters across, smaller than a proton. And also amazing, it would have contained only about 25 pounds of matter.
Now, this is mind-boggling to me. This is the Big Bang Theory, isn't that right? That there was this one little egg or period or dot of matter. But it hasn't really, because you change the size doesn't change the problem, does it?
That's right. You still have to explain that 25 pounds of matter, don't you?
There has to be that first something from which everything else came.
And then we have to talk about the fact that Alan Guth just violated all laws of physics in that he's saying everything we see around us today came from 25 pounds of matter. You know, we could look around just here in the studio, we recognize there's more than 25 pounds of matter. And yet he would say everything came from that. The prime question should have been, Alan, first explain where that 25 pounds of matter came from.
That's first cause, that's
and
right.
second, how do we go from 25 pounds to what we see around us today?
Yeah, those are really good questions, but those aren't the questions that get asked, are they?
Never. Let's look at the third option, which really, if you think about it for just a moment, is the only option left. The first option, it being eternal, is no good. The second option, something coming from nothing, is no good.
And by making something come from a little bit, that really isn't very different than
You
something
haven't helped
coming from
yourself
nothing.
a whole lot.
No.
The third and the only remaining option, really, is that the universe was created. It's a self-evident truth that nothing produces nothing, and in view of this, since something now exists, it must follow that something has existed forever. That something was responsible for the creation of the universe, that something was God.
And that's what we believe.
And that's a great proof. It doesn't take that much energy, that much time, that much logic to walk a young person outside and say, hey, you see all that? How did it get here? There's only three options: eternal, popped into existence from nothing, or it was created. We can show our children those first two don't fit the criteria. Thus, we've just proved the existence of God. In fact, if you ask for NASA astronomer John O'Keefe what he thinks about, we look out into the universe, he said, we are by astronomical standards a pampered, cosseted, cherished group of creatures. He said, if the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could have never come into existence. It is my view that these circumstances indicate the universe was created for man to live in. So
when we hear people say that all credible scientists believe in evolution, that isn't true. You have people like Dr. John O'Keefe who are not afraid to use words like create.
I think the more scientists look out into space or into nature, they realize, hey, there's a complexity here that evolution cannot explain. If we continue on down this path, we got another argument that is a great argument that proves the existence of God, the teleological argument, that is design itself. Don, if we look out into the universe, do we see design, for instance, with the Earth, how it's positioned in our solar system? A lot of times when we teach our kids about astronomy, we teach them about the solar system, we miss one of the greatest teaching opportunities there is, and that is, hey, this is a proof for the existence of God. We could talk about, for instance, the location, the orbit of the Earth. We could talk about the rotation, the makeup of the Earth, the distance from the sun, all of these pointing back towards a design. Now, I got to admit to you, Don, I'm not a math guy, but I want to spend just a second looking at the statistical odds of having a planet in just the right place to support life. For instance, the odds of there being in just the right type of galaxy is 1 in 7. The odds of being in the right location within that galaxy is 0.05 to the 5th billion. It gets worse. The odds of being near the right sun, that is, one that's not too old or too young, that's just the right age to provide warmth, is up 1 in 100. We then have to be the right distance from that sun, the odds being 1 in 40. Having the right rotation rate, or 1 in 4. The odds of having the right tilt, 1 in 360. So we add all of this up, and we get a number that looks like that.
That's a big number.
Now, realize, Don, we haven't gotten life yet. All we've done is simply put a heavenly body in a location that might be able to sustain life.
That's right. It's so just the fact that I'm going to just say that God made a place that could support life once He had made it couldn't happen. I mean, those numbers are so big that
statistically speaking,
there couldn't be a place to maintain life by chance.
That is not chance.
Yes.
That is not chance. Then you add the fact, okay, we know life, you have to have water. I mean, you think about what they're trying to look for on other planets, it's always water. Why? We know life has to have water, and yet we know the Earth's surface is covered by 72% water, perfect amount to provide an insulation, perfect amount to sustain life. We look at the fact that we have a water cycle today, recycling that water. And we ask ourselves, okay, not only does the earth have the proper amount of water, we have a cycle in place that's going to keep everything going.
To keep it fresh, yeah.
And yet we're to believe that that's an accident.
Yeah.
We then ask ourselves, all right, what about the sun? We all know the argument about, okay, the sun is just the right distance away, 93 million miles. But if you think about it for just a moment, in most people's homes, there's usually an argument that goes on between husband and wife.
Really?
And it's over that thermostat.
Okay, yeah, that's
You know,
true.
a lot of times ladies like it a little different than the men do, and yet God set the thermostat of the sun perfectly in order to sustain life. The sun's like a giant nuclear engine, gives off more energy in a single second than mankind has produced since creation. Converts 8 million tons of matter into energy every single second, has an interior temperature of more than 20 million degrees Celsius.
Incredible.
Just the right temperature. Also, are we really to believe that the distance that God has provided, that 93 million miles from the sun, is just by chance? Because you think about it for just a moment, we know that distance is needed to prevent the shock waves that are coming off the sun. We also know if we were a little bit closer, we'd burn up. If it were a little bit further away, we would freeze to death. And yet when our children run off to school, you know what they're learning about the position of the sun? That it got here from some Big Bang explosion.
Big bangs don't place things with precision. I mean, that's just an obvious statement. But explosions, if you had an explosion in a factory, it wouldn't assemble the products that need to put together. It took design. So the positioning and the rotation and the tilt, all of those things of the earth in relation to the sun, if they were off just a tiny bit, we wouldn't be here.
Tiny bit being the key word. If you think about it for just a moment, we look at the Earth's orbit. Now, to me, if the viewers don't fully wrap their hands around this one is mind-boggling. It was printed in Science Digest back in 1981, where they showed that the Earth moves in its orbit around the sun, departing from a straight line only 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. If it departed by 1/8 of an inch, we'd come so close to the sun that we'd be incinerated. If it departed by 1/10 of an inch, we'd find ourselves so far from the sun that we would freeze to death.
That's amazing when you think of it. That in 18 miles, we only move 1/9 of an inch.
And you think about asking a Department of Transportation worker to go out and pave a street 18 miles and only departing from a straight line by 1/9 of an inch.
Somebody had to lay that out and make it work, didn't they?
Somebody designed that.
That's right.
We also could ask about the moon. You know, we know today that the moon is responsible for the tides. You know,
Yes.
if we were to bring the moon just a little bit closer to us, we would experience tsunami waves on some of the coastal cities like we saw just a few short years ago.
Right.
If we moved the moon away, suddenly those tides would smooth out and the oceans would become stagnant. And you say, well, yeah, okay, no big deal. It's not a big deal unless, in fact, we want to continue breathing. Because we know, Don, there's plants in the ocean that are dependent on that wave motion. Those microscopic plants are producing 90% of the oxygen that you and I breathe.
Is that right? 90% of our oxygen comes from plants in the ocean.
And yet we're to believe the moon just got there by chance.
And if the moon wasn't there causing that motion, the ocean wouldn't be cleansing itself and all of those plants wouldn't be growing.
And suddenly we'd be running to the store looking for oxygen bottles.
Mercy.
That's where we are today. Now, we ask ourselves, all right, are we really to believe that the Earth's atmosphere, the tilt, the rotation, the distance to the moon, the distance from the sun, the Earth's orbit, the placement of the galaxy, is that really all just a product of evolution?
It just can't be, can it?
Statistically speaking, we've just made a great argument for a God, for a designer. There's a fellow by the name of Michael Murray who said almost everything about the basic structure of the universe, for example, the fundamental laws and the parameters of physics, the initial distribution of matter and energy is balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur.
It's a great quote. Well, you know, we've got to take a break, Dr. Brad, so you stay there for a minute, and you stay right there. Don't you go away as we look at design of the human body and how it shows us that there had to be a God who designed it. That's what we're going to look at when we get back. We want you to stay with us for that part of the show, so don't go away.
Creation versus evolution. You weigh the evidence. 3 trillion humans. That's a lot of people. Evolutionists tell us that man became truly human about 1 million years ago. With some simple calculations, the total number of people living on the Earth over the past 1 million years should be about 3 trillion. Where are all these people buried? And what happened to their bones? There should be evidence all over the Earth that massive numbers of people have lived over the past 1 million years. But we don't find it. Why not? Today's guest on Origins, Dr. Brad Harrop, is the co-founder of Focus Press Incorporated. He's also the co-editor of Think Magazine, where he's contributed many articles concerning the subject of creation. If you're searching for the truth and God's answers to life's questions, you'll want to subscribe to Think Magazine. Orders are being taken at 866-313-6474. For more information about Dr. Harrop, you can write to Focus Press Incorporated, 1600 Westgate Circle, Suite 125, Brentwood, Tennessee 37027. Or visit the website at www.focuspress.org.
We're back, and it's so good to have you back with us and to have you here with Dr. Brad Harrop, who is talking to us about how design demands a designer. Now, we've looked at how you can't get material without having someone who made it, a God who made us, and then you looked at the design of the whole universe and how perfectly we're positioned and the strategy it would take to put the earth in just the right place to sustain life. Now we're going to shift though to the human body, and there's a little bit design that went on to make us the humans that we are and for our life to function, isn't there?
Well, you would think so, but not everybody's in agreement. For instance, George Cohn, a Catholic priest, he was at the 2006 meeting for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Listen to what he said. The intelligent design movement belittles God, he said. He went on to comment that it makes God a designer, an engineer. The God of religious faith is a God of love. He did not design me.
I just want to say to the engineers listening to our program and to the architects that because you design and plan buildings and factories and products, does that make you love your wife any less? To say that intelligent design belittles God, I don't think this man's ever read the Psalms. The heavens declare the glory of God.
That's right.
The fact that He knit us together in our mother's womb declares the glory of God. It doesn't belittle the glory of God.
Let's take the first and most easiest argument. Evolutionists are telling us we come from a step-by-step process, so the question becomes, which one came first, nerves or organs?
Okay.
Well, if the viewers out there think, we've got to have organs in place, well, those nerves are actually controlling the organs. So if we don't have the nerves around, we can't digest our food or breathe properly. So somebody says, well, surely then we have nerves in place. Well, what good are those nerves without the organs there?
Right. So they have to happen simultaneously.
We know, in fact, nerve cells are of little use without the brain, the spinal cord to process the information. In fact, I've heard somebody make the comment one time, having a single nerve is about the equivalent of having a mouse for a computer with no computer. You can't get a whole lot done. On top of that, you add the fact we know it takes a cell to make a cell.
Yes.
So where did that first nerve cell come from? We just talked about the universe, and yet we've got to make a big leap from rock or a ball of material to life. We haven't made that leap in a laboratory. We don't have a clue of how you go from non-living to living. And yet we do know that nerve cells exist today. The question is, where did that first one come from?
And it's just as unanswerable in the human body as it was in the universe.
Precisely.
Go ahead.
If you think with me for just a moment, how do you really get a brain that is full of memories from some cosmologic explosion? How can we store memories? Don, I suspect you've got memories of childhood. Maybe it's sounds or smells or thoughts that will instantly take you back to a moment in your childhood.
Sure.
For me, there's a smell that when I smell it, it instantly carries me back to an ice cream store when I was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
The question is, if I came from some cosmic explosion, where am I storing that memory? Next point. I don't think many of our viewers would want to drink hydrochloric acid. If we were
I don't
to
recommend it.
If we were to put that in Coke machines or water fountains, I don't think too many people would want to sample that particular liquid. But here's an ironic point. Every single person has hydrochloric acid being made in their stomach.
Our stomach produces hydrochloric acid.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Now,
it's essential.
The question then becomes, all right, if this is an evolutionary scenario, did we evolve those acid-producing cells first, or did we evolve the container to store it in?
They have to, again, happen
Right.
simultaneously.
You want them simultaneously. Why would you build a container to store acid if you don't have acid-producing cells around? And how in the world do you control it if you've got acid
don't have a
producers?
container, sure.
That's right. Also, in looking at this, we know it takes active participation from all of these different components: liver, bile from the gallbladder, pancreas, stomach acid, intestinal enzymes to break down food sufficiently. You look and you've got carbohydrates, proteins, you've got fats. We have to be able to break that down in different parts of our digestive system. The question becomes, all right, can we think of an evolutionary step-by-step process where all of these things slowly are coming together that would allow us to properly break down food? We need all of those.
We need them all at once.
We need them all functioning in order to adequately break down foods in order to get the nutrients we need.
Is this what we call irreducible complexity?
Precisely. And that's if you really look at the human body, on a macroscopic and a microscopic level, there is so much complexity built into it. We could also do the same thing with the respiratory system. Oftentimes people think, all right, which one evolved first, the lungs or the heart? Now, most viewers would say you got to have a heart in place. But that heart is dependent on oxygenated blood. In fact, probably some of the viewers have a scar that reminds them, hey, they had some coronary arteries that were starting to constrict. They weren't getting enough oxygen.
So it's chicken and egg. You can't have, it's actually more than chicken and egg. You got to have them both together.
You
That's
really
all we're
do.
saying. Yes.
You certainly do. I mean, what good are the lungs without a pump to get it back and forth, and what good is the heart if you can't oxygenate it? On the screen, you'll notice the argument about blood vessels. Oftentimes we think blood is just a product of evolution, and yet we know blood itself is dependent on the nervous system, the muscular system, the digestive system. All of those components have to be there for that system to work.
And this interdependence argues against the possibility of these things evolving.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
We can know, and I think one of the things that I want to make sure the viewers understand, we can prove God really does exist. Too often in school settings, our kids are being told, you can't touch him, taste him, smell him, there's no evidence for his existence. And yet, Don, we looked at just two arguments today. We talked about the law of cause and effect, or cosmology. We looked at design. There's also morals. We know that morals exist. Where did they come from? Obviously from God. We can prove the existence of a God.
So that's two incredible proofs today that, to my mind, Dr. Brad, are absolutely irrefutable. That you can't get something from nothing, and you can't get the complexity that we have both in the universe and in the human body, as an example, without a designer who put it together in a wondrous way. My friends, don't let the big words, don't let the white coats and the sophisticated arguments of skeptic scientists keep you from the obvious truth that all of creation and even the intricacy of your human body points to a God who made you and who loved you and who's there for you. It's always been God's view that He created you. That should be your worldview too. And so think about those things until we're together next time. God bless you. It's been great being with you. Join us again for Origins.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file of program number 807 from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program number 807, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and the financial support of you, our Cornerstone Television family.